Okay, the next part of this test is we're going to check the one-way check valves. I know you don't get that yet, but you will pretty soon. And what we have is we have 3 air tanks on this truck. Every truck has 3 of them, and you have a supply tank, which is also called the wet tank, a primary tank, and a secondary tank. Now, this test right here, let me back up a little bit so you might can see that better. It says locate and drain the wet tank completely, recheck the dash gauges. A drop in either gauge indicates a problem with the one-way check valve of that tank. Now, what is a one-way check valve? A one-way check valve is a valve that only allows air to go one way. So if the valve is bad, meaning the air will go back the other way, and that causes a problem with your brakes and things like that. So let's look at it again. I'm going to crawl under here and show you where this is, and it's not that big of a deal. Locate and drain the wet tank completely. Recheck the dash gauge. Now I know the gauges have dropped a little from our last test, but we should still be able to do this. The wet tank is also called the supply tank, and it is always closest to the air dryer. So let me crawl under here. I've already looked at this. I sure hope you can see this. Let me back up a little. This tank right here is closest to the air dryer, which is in the front, and it tells us to drain that tank completely. This is the supply tank, the wet tank, primary, secondary back there. We'll get more into that a little bit. All you do is you open this valve and you let the air out. That's all you do. Now, let's go back up here. That air's letting out. It says drain it completely. Let's go back up here. Look at our gauges. Here they are. I'm sorry about moving around like this, but I don't really have an option right here. So, a drop in either gauge indicates a problem with the one-way check valve of that tank. Let's watch them and see what happens. And we are losing air in that tank right there. Primary, secondary. So what does that tell us? It tells us the one-way check valve going to the primary tank is bad because it would only go one way. It should not be going back into the tank. As the supply tank drains, it's pulling out of the primary tank because that valve is inoperative, and you can tell that by that right there. So we've just learned 2 things. We know, number 1, we've got an air leak because we lost more than 3 psi when we were holding the brake down for the 1 minute. And now we also know that we have a one-way check valve on the primary side that is leaking down. So we've done failed 2 of these tests right here. Okay, I'm going to regroup and we're going to move on to the next part.